Welcome to the Elevated Trader Podcast. I am Dr. Kristin Kidgel.
And I am Tracy Ball. Join us every week as we journey into becoming better traders.
We believe becoming better traders involves elevating our skill, mindset, and our health. In each episode, we will discuss the current book we are exploring, and we invite you to join us on this journey.
Are you ready to elevate your trading, mindset, and health to the next level? Let's do this. Welcome, everyone, to part 2 of The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod.
I have to tell you, I know that you had heard of it before, but I did not know anything about this guy. So he basically dies. You know, he's in a car accident. He's 20 years old. He dies, and it takes him just short of 10 years to basically turn his whole life around. I mean, his entire life around. And that says a lot because he just continually just keeps using this information. And this is not new information, is it? He's just put it into a simple read of everything that he's learned, and I don't know, just put it in a way, and then used it in his life and his story and all these things that it just makes for a really good book. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I like how he kind of says, "Well, did you go through this?" So I went through it. So
one of the things that, particularly when we experience trauma, you know, there's a natural tendency for people to blame themselves or to look for blame in others or whatever. And I want to make sure that, because he touches on this, he says, it is important to understand that responsibility is not the same as blame. While blame determines who is at fault for something, responsibility determines who is committed to improving things. And I think that is extremely valuable, that taking responsibility does not equate to blame. So by you taking responsibility of the situation that you're in, or taking responsibility of the circumstances that you're experiencing, does not mean that you are taking blame for it. It means that you're taking responsibility to improve the situation. You're taking control back.
I love it. I love that.
I think it's really pertinent and it's very important. So hopefully you guys all out there can hear that. Maybe it's the right time and place for you to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. Huge.
Yeah.
And if you've lived at least 20 to 30 years, you've been through something and maybe you're still holding on to it. Mm-hmm. Cool. So cool.
The other thing that was really powerful, I think, something that I wanted to highlight anyway, is what this book is all about, right? Which is helping you become the person that you need to be to create everything that you ever wanted in your life. There's no limits.
It goes back to the saying that, I'm not going to quote it perfectly, but basically, if you've dreamt it and you believe it, you can do it. And it sounds a little foo-foo, I guess, but I've had these dreams that just won't go away. Just like, why do I keep dreaming about this? And then you just have to go, okay, I guess I'm supposed to do something with this. I need to go in this direction. Quit fighting it.
Right.
So I can agree with that. And I love that. And it is about stepping up. If this is the direction that you're going and you're committed to it, let's just keep putting pieces of the puzzle together to make it so it happens.
Step number 1 is recognize there are no limits. And step number 2 is taking responsibility and realizing that you have control over your life.
And don't push blame on others for holding you back or from choices that you made or blah, 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 blah. Because I think we get wrapped up in blaming others. And then we just don't even know that we're blaming ourselves on some things.
Yeah. It's also important to recognize, some people are at fault for doing certain things, right? But that's not the point that we should be focusing on.
Okay.
Because that's not helpful. It's not valuable. It's not going to benefit you in any way, shape, or form. It's not going to get you out of the situation that you need to get out of. The blame, that's just one part of the equation.
Boom.
The next part is actually taking the responsibility to change it.
Boom. Okay. If you keep reading in this book, you're making that choice for that responsibility and then implementing it.
Exactly. Those are the 2 biggest takeaways from the introduction.
And don't complain about your circumstances. Okay. Moving right along.
I want to actually start with the first part of chapter 1, where he says, when you were born, everyone assured you that you could do, have, and be anything that you wanted when you grew up. So now that you've grown up, are you doing, having, and being anything and everything that you've ever wanted? Now, I completely agree that there's been mixed messages, actually, for most people growing up. I think on one half, you get told, yes, you can be, do, and say everything. But then on the other part, society is kind of fighting against that. And the role models that we're having aren't necessarily representing that. So I think that that's really key to recognize. So first of all, I want to talk to the parents out there that if you're a parent and you want your children to believe in themselves and you want your children to believe that they can grow up to be, do, and achieve anything that they want, then you need to start modeling that.
Ooh.
You need to start modeling that you can do, be, and achieve anything, because that is the most powerful representation of those words right there for your children, is to see you doing it.
And if you don't have children, maybe it's that there is a child that's looking up to you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Or other people in general looking up to you.
Well, first of all, as an adult, right? Not just a parent, but as an adult, I think we have to go, okay, well, you know, this 17-year-old over here, you know, reach out. If you have a teenager connecting to you on some level, looking you in the eye and actually answering your questions, they've connected to you. Mm-hmm. And so we probably have to remember those little nuances of being, I love that. I think that's really important. That just dawned on me. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. It is important. And I know teenagers that I've had in my life that I am a role model, and I see the struggle that they have because they don't believe in themselves, because their parents do not model the same behavior. And because parents, period, not necessarily their parents, but parents, period, regardless of what your relationship's like, they do hold a very strong presence in your life. And if you're not modeling that behavior, I've seen it. These kids doubt themselves because they believe that they're the same as you.
Learned behaviors, even like subconsciously, that age.
And it's so sad.
Well, it's changeable, salvageable on some level, we hope.
Now, I'm curious what you think about your level 10 life, because I really like what he says here. It says, is there a difference between average and mediocre? Not so much. And that was the saying by the best-selling author Seth Godin. And I want to touch on that a little bit. What are your thoughts?
Between average and mediocre? I think it's basically just synonyms.
It is, but I never really thought about it. How often do we talk about average? Because mediocre comes with such a bigger emotional attachment to it than average.
Just a different energy in the word.
Totally.
Yeah, but nobody ever really wants to be average.
Some people don't mind settling. Because settling, average.
Mediocre.
I'm just an average Joe, whatever it might be. They're okay with that. That's true. Even our school system caters to the average. Is it okay to be average? Do you want to be average? Well, let's substitute that word for mediocre. Does it feel the same?
No.
Right? We talked about this in our first book with changing the word to change the meaning to affect change in how we deal with things, right? So let's deal with average and change that word to mediocre and see how that applies. And do you feel as comfortable with your average life when you start calling it your mediocre life?
So good. Yeah. Now just skip ahead to the very end of the book where he just says, do these steps. Because if you're like, okay, this book and these steps are designed to take you from average and mediocre to your next level. If you're reading this book, you're trying to get to the next level, period.
I want to touch a little bit more on this level 10 thing. Okay.
Go for it.
Because, he's talking about getting to your level 10 life.
Okay.
Life is not just your job. It's not just your family. It's not just your health. It's everything, which means in order for you to get to a level 10 in your life, you need to get to a level 10 in your job, in your health, in your family, in your relationships, in everything that you do.
Your happiness, your health, and your wealth.
He says in here, it's simply dedicating purposeful time each day to become a level 10 person that is capable of creating, attracting, achieving, and sustaining level 10 success in every area. Now, I want to touch on that and emphasize the word purposeful.
Okay.
I used to live beside some people and their granddaughter used to always say that, practice makes perfect. I remember him always correcting his granddaughter and saying, no, perfect practice makes perfect.
That's a good one. I've heard that too.
And I've heard that before, but really when you break it down, because I don't want to encourage perfection, because that's not attainable. It's not even logical. But really what you should be saying is that intentional practice makes for growth.
I like that. In my mind, when you were saying that, I was substituting the word intentional in there, but then I really feel like a lot of people have no freaking clue what intentional means.
Well, let's make it specific. Let's talk about, say, learning a skill in basketball. If you wanted to go and improve your free throw, you have some practice time. So let's throw 500 free throws. Let's not practice our layup because that's not achieving the goal of improving your free throw. That's intention.
Yep.
There's a difference between play as practice and intentional practice. Intentional means that you are deliberately setting out to improve a skill and you will repeat it over and over and over again. Otherwise, you're just playing.
That sounds like back trading.
Exactly. And let's talk about back trading for a second, because that's another example. And one of the assignments that I give some of my students is to go through a back trading session, but record themselves. And while they are back trading, they need to go candle by candle, stop with each candle, explain what they're seeing, explain what's happening, give all as much information as they can absorb. It slows them down, first of all, to be very intentional with their back trading instead of just click, 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 and get through it as fast as they possibly can. And that starts a habit of intentional back trading.
Very cool.
Which leads to better growth. It makes your practice time more efficient.
Very intentional.
And that's what needs to happen with everything that you're doing. So, a lot of people, they say, I don't have time. I can't fit this in. I challenge you to ask yourself, when you're approaching every single task that you have in your task or in your calendar or anything like that, when you're approaching them, how much intention are you putting into them? Because I can guarantee when you do things with intention, your efficiency goes up, which means you lead to more free time.
There we go. That's what everybody wants. More free time. So are we back to discussing level 10?
That's what it is, right? So every aspect of your level 10 life, so every area, you need to approach it with intention. You need to approach it with deliberateness, purposefulness.
Yep.
Break down each of those levels, because I can promise you can reach a level 10 in one or two area, but only a level 3 in the other, and you do not have a level 10 life.
No, it averages out, right? And ends up being more mediocre. There you go. But making these changes will be cool. I'm excited about it. Chapter 2, he hits on them really briefly, very, very briefly.
I just want to say that never forget, because he brings this up a few times in the book, but never forget that who you are becoming is the single most important determining factor in your quality of life now and for your future.
What's that mean to you?
It means that right now is extremely important. Every consequence or every decision and choice that I make right now is going to affect my future. That's number one. Number two, it also means my future is not defined. My future is not set in stone. My future is not dictated by anybody else but me.
Right. It's definable.
Yeah, but it's not set.
I also feel like there's a part in here where he just barely, briefly, like one sentence, maybe two, goes over, what is your passion? What is your goal? Because if you really don't have that, then where are you going? And so can you even do all these without a passion or goal? Yeah, you probably could. But why? First of all, why would you? But would you stick to it if you didn't have a direction, which would be, I want to go towards that goal, or I want to go and I'm very passionate about it. I mean, a goal or, whatever. So to recap, and his example was 2 huge life-altering things that happened to him. And he decided not to be the victim and to make change. And he did.
So in chapter 2, one of the first things that I highlighted anyway was he said that Jim Rohn, I should say, he said something that although I had heard before, I never really got it. So he had been listening to something that Jim Rohn had said. He'd heard it before, but he never really got it. And you talked about that at the beginning, being in the right place for the reading. We touched on that, right? Being in the right place. Yeah. And sometimes, and I've actually had students that have said this, oh yeah, so-and-so said this to me and it clicked, or I read this and it clicked. And it's like, yeah, that's the same thing that we've been talking about, whatever, but you hear it in a different way, or you experience it in a different way, or in a different time. You see it with kids all the time too. As a parent, you're not always the best person to be sharing your knowledge, but they'll learn it from somewhere else. Whatever it might be. But I thought that was really applicable because this book, like I said, has a ton of stuff that I've heard before. But until I was able to read it in this context, in this way, with these words put on the page the way that they were and the flow, I got more out of it.
Interesting. Right? As the student appears. Or as the student is ready, the teacher appears. I love it.
Exactly. And then something we talked about in the first book, remember I brought this up, they say it again, your level of success will rarely exceed your level of personal development because success is something you attract by the person that you become.
Awesome. No, I think it's very well written. And I think it's, I haven't listened to the audiobook, but I'm sure it's just as good. And, you know, the first challenge he talks about is finding time. I think you've already touched on that, how just habits that you created unknowingly before the book and I've created before the book. I just think that this book has encouraged me to alter them.
Mm-hmm. It's also bringing me back. Because there's things that I used to do that I've kind of put back on the shelf, and I need to take them off the shelf and re-implement them because I have become complacent in what I used to do, right? Because again, priorities can change, things can get in the way, things can distract you, and sometimes it's through these little engagements that bring you back into focus. And this book happens to be one of those things that are going to be bringing me back into focus, things that I've let slide, things that I have lost focus of. And I'm proud of that, or I'm happy for that, excited for that. Yeah. And just to be clear, and I think I've already said it once, this is not new information. It's just put into a way that helps you maybe not digest it easier, but to put it into play easier in your life. Yeah. So he just says, you know, I know what the important things are, you know, meditation, affirmations, journaling, visualization, reading, and exercise. These are the important things. And so I think we can all agree with that, whether you do them or not. You're like, oh yeah, these are all really good. When the heck am I going to do these? And so he had assigned 10 minutes for each and attempted to do all 6. And he's like, the morning that transformed my life. So he's got some things on how to do it. And again, we're just even on page 13, and he's jumping into it. I like that about him. Mm-hmm. Well, as we end this episode, I just want to leave you with one final thought, and that is the story of the human race is the story of men and women selling themselves short. That's a quote from Abraham Maslow. Think about that as we head off to the next episode. See you then. Thank you for joining us today. For more information about the show, as well as our list of current reads, check us out at www.theelevatedtrader.com. Remember to subscribe and share if you found value in today's episode. See you next week.